Guys are bad friends. Like this thing. All of you. Bad friends.
So Sumai is here, Charlie's here. No Ku yet. Who is gonna do the other bio? She's in Arkansas. Then our substitute is Valerie. Who's not here yet. And Elizabeth, I had you signed up to be our bouncer. So can you log into the Zoom and I'm gonna admit you early.
You try to send it to them. He wants you to, he's gonna be doing Zoom, and he said that you would let him and have the access to the tape to see to he can play his PDF. So he can access.
Yeah, make him a host.
And then I wanted to ask you, the other group that wants to speak to us, use their Zoom or let them use ours?
Use theirs. Yeah.
Use theirs. Yeah, the reason why I said we could use theirs is because that way we could advertise for you, because we have to use this Zoom until April.
I think so. What I did for this Zoom is, even though it had expired, I was able to go back in and like create a new one. Create not a new one, but to duplicate the one we already had. So that's why I didn't change the link. But I'm like not 100% sure that would happen again. We can never know. Valerie, we're gonna need your services. You're the substitute reader, and Sue is absent. Do you have the bios printed?
Yeah. I think they can use the bio.
Are there any completed permission slips for next Wednesday's field trip to the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum?
Oh, well, I haven't signed my form yet.
Oh, you haven't gotten it signed yet? Here's a blank form. Yes.
Like, when do we need to turn them in?
The deadline to send it in is Wednesday.
Okay.
Now make sure you get it signed today or tomorrow.
Who's reading? Are you reading one of the bios? Okay, so here's one of the bios. Who are you gonna read? Who's reading what? Who is she supposed to read? Which bio does she read?
She is Gronski. Is he major or major general?
Major General, both Major General. I'm gonna read Gronski. Anybody else need a bio?
I'm gonna put you up there as Val.
Are you 17 and 10?
Whoever's reading, who's reading General Williams' bio is Charlie. You still have it? Yeah, he's got it. So we got it.
And
then she's got that one.
everybody's
And then,
got.
about JWAC. You have the about JWAC?
I have a picture.
So you got ready for your phone? Let me see if I got it. About JWAC.
Do you think we should ask our members here in the room to not be on the Zoom and just observe here and ask their questions so that we can save those spaces in case we reach 300? Or would he like to see their faces?
I think he wants to see their faces.
Likes to see their faces. Okay.
Let me go ahead and.
So everybody log into the Zoom. It's the same link we always use. So find it wherever you find it. Make sure your computer audio is off, like your volume is off, and your face is on. Video camera is on. We would love for you to write down questions as you have them. I can pass around like Post-it notes. I think it helps to write down a question before you get up and ask it. So take a Post-it and pass them back.
Let me go ahead and get a copy. I did let me go ahead and get you a printed copy of the about you. That way, I got you.
I thought I had one. Yeah. You're right. About paper. That's what this.
Anybody see the mod's music?
It's not in the script.
Oh, okay. All right, but you're going to orchestra?
I was
What, the instrument?
no, my.
Oh, like, what do you get? Are you in the chamber music?
Yeah, well, I have that, I don't have my binder, it's like. It's only needed, but.
Let me borrow a pen.
I don't think there's any that.
So everybody grab a Post-it, take and pass it back. This way you can write down your question. And then you can come up to the screen and ask. Now let the guest speakers in if I see them. There's a lot of people from the public. There's also quite a few ROTC folks, and I think another high school here. Lots of cadet, so-and-so, cadet, so-and-so. Oh, yeah.
They made bots join the.
Yes.
I know, you played.
Yeah.
What about it?
Dr.
What
Fauci.
about it?
See, I don't see the guest speakers yet.
And then the bots were impersonating like a school, I forgot, but it was
One of the
kind of
schools.
funny.
Well, no, there's no World Cup. Whenever we were trying to.
Oh, whoa, sorry.
We had like
Yeah.
so many bots.
Do you want me to?
Caroline, you're leaving. Here's a pass. I don't know if you need it, but
Do you want me to admit everyone or?
no, not yet. I don't see our speakers yet. So I'm like, I want to let the speakers in first so that they're here. Yeah, Charlie?
Most of them I didn't even know. It's like, okay, go ahead. If you want to.
Stop. If you struggle, you can just say Iraq. Is that the only Iraq city?
Yeah.
On the paper. Okay, Fallujah.
That's not the only I can see.
No, yeah, it's not. Okay, I'm looking for guest speakers on here. I'm not seeing them yet.
Oh,
Oh, James
James
Williams.
Key's there. Admit, yep,
And then maybe, are they together or separate?
no, separate. He's in, because that.
Hi, Major General Williams. I haven't let any people in yet. I was just looking for Major General Gronski.
Yeah, he should be coming in pretty soon.
Okay. I'm gonna send a message to the people in the waiting room and say that we will begin at 2:10. And that way, in the next 8 or 9 minutes, we can practice. I'm gonna set you up as co-host so you can share your screen.
Okay.
Let me make you co-host. Also, hi, I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, it's great. How are you doing?
Good, how are you doing?
Good. Hope you had a good spring break.
I did. Just
Great.
hanging with the kids at home.
There you go. That's great.
All right, I'm just looking through the waiting room to see when he gets here. I'm gonna message the folks in the waiting room.
You want me to test to see if we could do the screen share?
Yeah, try your screen share.
Okay, let's see. Okay, can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay, let me see if I can do the slideshow here. Is that, can you see that well?
Yes, yeah, it looks great.
Right.
I'll start this now.
Okay, well, I'll just leave it up there. So that
Perfect.
it's there.
That way when they come in, they'll see that on the screen.
Right.
We can take care of it on Wednesday.
Yeah, I don't know if Maria told you, the General Gronski has to depart at 3:10 because he has a conference call he needs to do. So if the kids have any questions, I can stay longer. They can ask him any questions because he's going to give kind of an overview of his experience in Ukraine and in the U.S. Army Europe Command where he was before he retired.
Okay. I see someone in the waiting room who has named themselves NATO. Do you think that that could be him?
I don't know. That it's possible. Does it give you? I guess you could chat with them and see who they are.
Yeah, let me check.
We need to write our names down on this.
Oh, I'm not, write your name.
I'm sorry, like I'm which one?
No, you write your name there, just write, no, one is for General Gronski and one is for General Williams, just it's a thank you note, then you just sign.
Sorry, just wanted to know since they're.
You write a note on each one, yeah, I mean, just write your name on each one.
I don't know if I can message somebody in the waiting room individually. Let me see.
I need
Now,
to-
you're supposed to have some people from the larger World Affairs Council too, I understand. Is that right?
Yes, right now in the waiting room, we have, so I've got it on my big screen, so I'm looking that way
Yeah,
now.
it looks like 55 people, 56.
Yeah,
Mhm.
So glad we were able to get the Zoom to work, yes. And they're waiting to be let in.
oh, let me let you in. This is Vera Williams.
Oh, I don't want.
Okay, you should be focused now.
Is somebody here with my mute? Draw it all the way down?
Keep that on my screen.
Yeah.
I'm good? Okay. No, yeah. I'm not on there. Oh, I think.
I want to text a message to General Gronski, see if he is waiting there.
I'm wondering if the person NATO is someone else.
I think probably just like some random student here.
Yeah, it's wise enough that that person is because Gronski, General Gronski would have let us make his own name on it. I can't unmute myself, can I? I can't.
You can unmute yourself, but it'll echo.
Oh,
So if you want to talk, you can come to this podium.
Kim, did you get a message from General Gronski?
Well, I sent him a note. We'll see. If not, I'll give him a call here real quick. I think I'll do that anyway. I'm gonna put myself on mute so it doesn't echo.
Okay.
Name my men as.
Yeah, try to
That's
invite
weird.
NATO in because he says he doesn't know. He's not sure what name it's coming up. So that may be him.
Okay.
That's it. You're connected.
So he was native. Some of these people that have joined our classrooms, I heard from teachers are gonna have.
Okay, I think that was Gerald Gronski. He said that looked like he was connecting, so.
Yep, here I
Okay.
am.
Oh, hi.
Great.
Oh, he is NATO.
Okay, welcome. We weren't sure if that was you.
Yeah, I don't know why it says NATO. I really don't. But and I'm
Well, John,
And
can you turn your video on, John?
yeah, that's what I'm looking at right
It
now.
should be the bottom left there.
Yep, I got it.
Oh, there you are. Great.
Okay. And Major General Gronski, I'm Emily Ramirez. I teach with Maria. She's actually here in the room with me too.
Yep. Hi, Maria.
So she's there, and she's also on her own screen. And then we have about 28 students in this room. And then in the waiting room, there are some other classrooms around the building where the teachers are logged in. It looks like there's 78 in the waiting room.
Okay.
It is 2:08 right now. So if it's okay with you guys, I'll mute myself and start letting people in. And then at 2:10, I'll welcome everyone.
Okay. Is my sound okay?
Yes. Yeah, your sound is good. And then you need to screen share, or is it all coming from Major General Williams' computer?
It's coming from General Williams.
All right.
Yeah, and
And
I'll go
I'm
ahead
gonna-
and mute. I'll go ahead and mute too, just
Yeah.
until you're ready. Okay.
We'll all mute ourselves, and then at 2:10, I'll welcome everyone.
Okay, sounds good.
We're meeting all of them.
It's 2:10, which we are about to begin, but we still have a few people coming in from the waiting room. So we'll start in about 1 minute. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and a very special thank you to our guests, Major General Williams and Major General Gronski. My name is Emily Ramirez. I'm the co-sponsor of the Junior World Affairs Council of Lake Highlands High School, along with Mrs. Vieira Williams, who is here with us as well.
Wait,
We do want to remind everyone that this is a presentation that is geared towards high school students. And while we do invite questions and comments in the chat, we just want to make sure that you keep in mind that they need to be appropriate for high school audiences. At this time, we are going to invite the president of our Junior World Affairs Council, Sumaya Saki, to the podium, who is going to tell us a little bit about JWAC.
hello everyone. I'm Sumaya Saki, the president of JWAC. The World Unified Council, or JWAC, is a nationwide organization that provides high school students the opportunity to learn international issues and become more globally aware. JWAC engages students in discussion on global topics of international importance. The discussion may be student-led, teacher-led, or speaker-led, such as our Lake Highlands High School Global Awareness Speaker Series. JWAC sponsor provide assistant, material, speaker, as well as opportunity for community service. Miss Maria Vera Williams and Ms. Ramirez are the current co-sponsor, and they has been co-sponsor for like 7 years. There are over 70 JWACs in the area, most of them made up of public, charter, and private schools. And Dallas-Fort Worth, Lake Highlands High School has been the first JWAC and the whole Fort Worth Metroplex for 3 years consistently, 2019, 2020, and 2021. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sumaya. And now sophomore Charlie Johnson is going to introduce our first guest speaker.
Major General James L. Williams, USMC retired, served in the Marine Corps 38 years. He served in multiple conflicts. General James Williams served his country in the military for 38 years. He retired on August 1st, 2010. He has commanded Marines at every level in and out of combat. He was last assigned as the commanding general, 4th Marine Division from April 2007 to April 2010. He's a certified force reconnaissance special operations Marine, which includes specialized training in counterterrorism operations, combat martial arts, mountaineering, military scuba diving, long-range amphibious operations, submarine special operations, special weapons and tools training, cross-training with Army Rangers, Army Special Forces, Navy SEALs, Air Force Special Operations, and Allied Special Operation Units, and military freefall skydiving operations, HALO and HAHO. Previous positions held were as the Assistant Division Commander, 2nd Marine Division, Deputy Commanding General, Marine Corps Combat Development Command, Assistant Division Commander, 2nd Marine Division, in combat operations at Camp Blue Diamond, Ramadi, Iraq, Deputy Commanding General, 1st Marine Expeditionary Force in Fallujah, Iraq, Deputy Director of Operations CJTF 180, conducting combat operations in Afghanistan. He also served on the Secretary of Defense's Reserve Force Policy Board from 2007 to 2010.
Thank you, Charlie. And now Senior Valerie Asamota is going to come up and introduce our second guest speaker.
Major General John L. Gronski, current USA, retired, currently serves as a senior mentor for the U.S. Army Mission Command Training Program, an adjunct fellow for the Center of European Policy Analysis, a Washington, D.C. based think tank, and as president of Cedar Grove. Can you hear me now?
Speak a little louder.
John L. Gronski, Major General, USA, retired, currently serves as a senior mentor for the U.S. Army Mission Command Training Program, an adjunct fellow for the Center for European Policy Analysis, a Washington, D.C. based think tank, and as president, Leader Growth, LLC, a leadership, development, and management consulting firm. Gronski served for over 40 years in the United States Army, in active duty and in National Guard, and retired from the Army in June 2019. He commanded infantry units at the company, battalion, brigade, and division level. His last assignment was as U.S. Army GRIP Deputy Commanding General, National Guard, from May 2016 until April 2019. He served as commanding general for the 28th Infantry Division, leading approximately 15,000 soldiers. Gronski is a combat veteran and commanded the 2nd Brigade, the 28th Infantry Division in Ramadi, Iraq, from 2005 and 2006. The brigade was manned with over 5,000 US soldiers, Marine, airmen, and sailors, and added an additional 5,000 Iraqi soldiers for the one-year deployment. In 2002, Gronski commanded a task force for 2,000 soldiers and deployed to the central region of Europe to conduct a force protection mission of US installments in the wake of the 9/11 attacks. He spent a year in Lithuania, leading a small team of American and Lithuanian military personnel and Lithuanian civilians.
Thank you, Valerie. And let us now welcome our guest speakers, and we'll turn it over to them.
Well, thank you so much, Mrs. Ramirez and Mrs. Vieira Williams. It's a pleasure for me to be here, especially with a great friend, General John Gronski, a fellow warrior. As was already mentioned, he and I spent quite a bit of time in Iraq, and of course he had great responsibility for, at the time, which was the most dangerous city in the world, our Ramadi, Iraq, and did a fabulous job with his troops, Marines, soldiers, sailors, and airmen, and as well as the Iraqi army that served with him and served with our overall command. And today, this is a rare treat for he and I to be on at the same time. Usually we're just talking on the phone, but this is, as we like to say, we're twins here, twin warriors. And so anyway, I want to let John make any comments he would like before we start. John? You might want to take yourself off mute, John. There you go.
There we go. Okay. First, I just want to say, General Williams, thank you for inviting me to be part of this. And again, I know Emily and Maria, thank you for the invitation. It's really an honor to be part of this very important program. I just want to say that I consider General Williams to be not only a friend, but a mentor of mine. I not only served with him, but worked for him when I commanded that brigade in Ramadi. And during those very trying times, I very much relied on General Williams' counsel as I tried to do my best along with the soldiers and Marines and others that we had working together there. So General Williams, thank you for everything you've done for me throughout my career since I've known you for now well over 15 years. I just want to say that I think the topic today is a very important one. I think as we watch the news on a daily basis, it's very distressing to see what has happened in Europe, something that has not occurred there since World War II. And I really relish the opportunity to be part of this discussion with my dear friend and mentor, General Williams. So, sir, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, John. And I'm sure I owe you some money for all those good comments that you were making there. Well, let me just start by saying that and set a little bit of a scene here, if you will, to what's going on with a little bit of history. And I don't want to take any thunder from any of the teachers that are teaching any of these subjects right now, but I think it's worth going through some history here. So one of the things I want to start with preliminarily is talk about some principles of justice. One thing we do in the military is we look at the execution of war as something as the last course of action that we really want to do, but we're prepared to do. And all of this is wrapped around certainly a lot of pain over history, different wars, different treaties, that sort of thing. But to set the tone for what's going on today, you have to go back and look at some of the history that leads us up to today, especially in Europe. So if you go back to what's known as the 100 Years' War, this was a period between England and France fighting each other. This is from roughly 1337 to the year 1453. And when you look at it, it's really more than 100 years. It's about 160 years of war. And people would have thought that, you know, Europe would have gotten tired of war at 100 years worth of conflict. Apparently that wasn't the case. Europe continued to have fight, a lot of tribal fights. And then what became really the standard by which sovereignty for nations was built around was a peace treaty called the Peace of Westphalia. Westphalia is an area of Germany. It was actually done in the city of Munster, where this peace was, and it was a conflict between Spain, the Dutch, as well as the Germans. And so after 30 years of war between 1618 and 1648, that peace treaty was set. And then essentially, this was the foundation of what we would call the modern state. And then as you come up to the conflicts past World War I, World War II, really from the period of about 1865 to 1949, after World War II, was the Geneva Convention. So Geneva Convention 1 and 2 was a driver. And then in 1977, there were two protocols, Protocol 1 and Protocol 2. Those define how war should be conducted with keeping civilians in mind, the media, and military workers that were non-combatant military folks. So keeping that in mind, this brings us up to the day. So if I can move on here, I'll kind of move the slides through here. If we can kind of make this work. There we go. Okay, so kind of our agenda and discussion today, a brief historical timeline, and I call it Road to War Again, because Europe has been at war for so long, and who would have thought we would be back where we are today? We would have thought World War II would have ended a lot of conflicts in Europe, but apparently not. Then I'll talk a little bit about who's who in the zoo, the leaders, the key players, the politicians. Then we'll talk a little bit about the battlefield layout, what's next, what concerns lay ahead. And of course, General Gronski will talk about his experiences directly in Ukraine with U.S. Army Europe. And obviously we'll have an overall discussion about the Russian-Ukraine war, and then the impending humanitarian disaster that we've all seen, and then any questions and discussion that we need to have. And I would just say administratively, I know General Gronski has a hard stop at 10 after the hour, and because he has another important conference he needs to be at. And so when we get to the questions and discussion, if you have anything for him, we're going to let him answer as many of those questions as he can possibly stand, and then I'll stay around if you have additional questions. Here's some questions to think about. You know, is Putin a war criminal? Is this a just war? You know, for the lawyers that might be on the call, you know, there's a Latin term called ad just bellum, just war. And that just war theory is what drives how we make decisions, at least in the United States. And then, you know, is it a just war for the United States, NATO, and the European Union for their involvement? And should we do more? And what are we going to do, and where do 10 to 20 million refugees go? Who pays for the end of these hostilities? Should we do more to punish the oligarchs? How will China play in this conflict? Should we be concerned about escalation of the war? Is war in space a possible battlefield? Is cyber warfare going to be a factor? So think about these things, and you probably have other questions, but those are just a little bit there to stimulate your thought. Okay, so let me just kind of go through this timeline real briefly. So roughly 1880 AD, Ukraine was settled by the Vikings. Oleg was the Viking leader at that time. And then you get into the age that we call the Age of Turmoil from 1400 to 1686. This is where the Golden Horde came in. These are the Turks. Lithuanians were fighting with the Poles, and there was several conflicts going on there. Crimea was fought over. The Cossacks, who are basically Turks, came in and they had their fights. There was the Russo-Polish War that occurred during that time. 1710, 1795, there was constant conflict. The Ottoman Turks were fighting. There was a partition of Poland. Lithuania was back in the fight. The Russian conquest of Crimea. This is basically the Tsars and the Russian Empire. Continuing on, from 1795 to 1900, the Russian Empire was very active. The Austrian Empire was in control of what's now modern day Ukraine. And then you get into the 1915 to 1922 period. This is chaotic warfare. There's the Russian Revolution going on. The Tsar is defeated. Ukraine, of course, now becomes a founding republic of what is now the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. So a founding member of that. In 1932 to 1933, of course, Stalin is the dictator in Russia. He starved 6 million Ukrainians in what's known as the Holodomor, or the terror famine, where he just literally used famine to kill these Ukrainians. And then 39 to 1944, you got World War II. The Nazis occupy Ukraine. They create genocide of the Jewish population and invade Russia. 1953, of course, the war is over by this time. Stalin dies. Nikita Khrushchev takes over the Communist Party. He then allows for a Ukrainian cultural revival, because prior to this, the Ukrainian diaspora, if you will, was being bleached out, which I believe that's what Putin is trying to do today. He's trying to bleach out the Ukrainian culture. And then there was a transfer of Crimea to Ukraine from Russia. So part of what was a war later on in 2014, Ukraine and Russia fighting over Crimea is another evolution that started back here in the 50s. 1989, the Berlin Wall comes down. I was actually in Berlin during this time. I was on the East Berlin side, so I've kind of seen both sides. And then by 1991, Ukraine separates into an independent nation after the breakup of the former Soviet Union. They won independence at this point. Now, of course, Russia and during this time, there's a lot of things going on with Russian leadership. President Reagan, of course, had gone to Russia, asked Mr. Gorbachev to tear down the wall, because that started the whole evolution of the Berlin Wall coming down. He stays a while, and then you have a new leader that comes in. He then gets essentially voted out. Putin comes in. So after Putin, the Russian Chechnya War starts. In 2008, again, I was in the Republic of Georgia. We were training Georgian troops. 4 days after I left, Russia invades Georgia. 2014, Russia-Ukrainian war over Crimea, which to this day is still controlled by the Russians. 2014, really a month after that particular conflict, there's a war in the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine, in the cities of Donetsk and Luhansk. That had been fought over from 2014 till the Russians invaded Ukraine in February of this year. So that brings you up to speed, at least in terms of a timeline. So now let's talk about who's who in the zoo, as we like to call it. Okay, so here's the individual of the hour. And he is the driver. He is the force driver in the Russian diaspora. And these comments that I've put in here, these are from very longer speeches that he's given. And I say Vladimir Putin is a megalomaniac. And what that means, if you don't know that word is somebody that relishes power, wants power, and will always be in power. And this is pretty much where he's been since he has moved into the leadership in Russia. And so this first statement, it really was a kind of a stab at the United States. He says, millions around the world increasingly see America not as a model of democracy, but as relying solely on brute force, cobbling coalitions together under the slogan, either you're with us or against us. And this other statement, which was from a longer recent speech that he did, he says, I'll start with the fact that modern Ukraine was entirely created by Russia, more precisely Bolshevik communist Russia, which he's basically telling you he wants to go back to what the old Soviet Union was. And that was in control of all the republics that had left the old Soviet Union. His personal security team, affectionately known as the Three Musketeers or the Musketeers, there's really more than three of them. These individuals are specially trained bodyguards, many of them from the old KGB philosophy, or what's now their replacement called the FSB, the Federal Securities Bureau. These individuals are never older than 35. They want physically capable fighters to protect him. So as some people have said, he's protecting himself against the Julius Caesar moment so that somebody wouldn't potentially assassinate him. His security team, these individuals here are really probably the most loyal people that he has. On the upper left, the director of the SCR, which is essentially an internal security bureau, Mikhail Fradkov, and then on Putin's right, or our right, as we're looking at the picture, is Alexander Bortnikov. He is the FSB commander. The FSB is somewhat like our Homeland Security Department, or if you understand MI5, which is the British version of our Homeland Security team. But he also has activities going on in different foreign countries. On the upper right, the director of the SVR, which is their foreign intelligence agency, Sergey Narishkin, grew up with Putin in the old KGB. Recently, there was an interesting televised piece that Putin was basically having all these leaders come up and kind of endorse the fact that he's going to invade in Ukraine. Sergey Narishkin seemed to be the only one that fumbled his words, and he looked very nervous. In fact, he was perspiring, and Putin was really chiding him in an embarrassing way. And don't know whether his term at that agency is going to be continuous. We don't know, but obviously there was something going on between them. Down on the bottom left, the two gentlemen that are leading the war effort in Ukraine and elsewhere. On the right is the defense minister, Sergey Shoigu. He is not really a military guy. He wears a uniform of the military because he is defense minister, but he has no military experience. As opposed to the chief of the military staff, General Valery Gerasimov, he is a military man, and he's been in several conflicts that the Russians had. On the bottom right, Russian Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev, he is also what you would call an oligarch. So he's involved with Putin in various business enterprises and so forth. And then this is just what we would call his power team, probably the closest people on the upper left, the red, you see the oligarchs. There's more than that, but those are some of his closest allies. The oligarchs on the bottom, they're the ones currently not on sanction, but that could change. And then on the right, the Siloviki, which is the security and military faction. These are all the people that manage the various parts of their security apparatus. And so I just put that out there for your information. These are some of the oligarchs. There are more of them. One of the things that's interesting about the oligarchs, 4 of the most significant oligarchs in Putin's hierarchy here are Jewish, and they're very well connected to Israel. Some have said that maybe one of the reasons Israel didn't criticize or go right out for the sanctions is because of the connectivity here. And I'm sure there'll be more discussions about that along the way in the intervening months and probably years from now. But anyway, this is just the faces of these individuals. And by the way, they're all billionaires. They all run different industry groups, from oil, gas, shipping, import, export, steel, you name the industry, they're involved in it. And talk a little bit about the Ukrainian leadership. I kind of call this David versus Goliath with a little help from his friends. So many of you have seen many pictures of Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. He's gone from entertainer to leader of the people. What he has demonstrated is the epitome of will. As General Gronski knows, we know on the battlefield, it's not necessarily the size of your weapons, but the size of your will to fight and how long you want to fight. And at least the Ukrainian people show that. Most people would say if he was a leader in any other country, if he was under attack, he would have gone somewhere else, but he stayed there. So he represents a backbone of steel. Also, he's shown heroic and inspirational leadership, and essentially that never, ever quit spirit. But he has a small leadership team. This is his leadership team meeting. This is, very small team compared to Putin, obviously, but they're committed. This is his military leadership team. Again, small group, very capable, and again, committed. And as long as we're helping them, I'm sure they'll be able to do what they need to do. In this picture here, on the right, the man with the sort of the bushy white hair, Ilor Kolomolsky is one of the big oil industry Ukrainian oligarchs. Obviously, oil is important in the region, oil and gas, and so obviously they have these conversations. On the right, closest to Zelensky, I'm sorry, on the left, close to Zelensky, happens to be the lawyer that Kolomolsky has asked to be a close advisor. So there's always some questions about how the oligarchs work with the leadership. In this case, we don't know a lot about this individual. We know he's a well-trained lawyer. He's very capable, we understand, but these individuals do influence the president. Here are some of his oligarchs that you'll see, you may recognize on the bottom rightmost window there. That's the former president, the one that Zelensky had defeated. But he is very big in the media in Ukraine. So, but all of these guys are very close to the leadership in Ukraine. Let's talk about the battlefield layout. So here are the current war postures. As you know, on the right-hand side, that's the eastern part of Ukraine, closest to the Russian border. The red areas, Luhansk and Donetsk, been contested now since 2014. If you go to the bottom, you'll see Crimea. Crimea is essentially a peninsula, very important in terms of the Black Sea because of the Russian fleet, as well as access for the Ukrainians. And of course, the Black Sea is, the access to it comes through the straits that are there in Turkey. So it's a very narrow area. And if you ever had a chance to go through there, you know, the large ships are probably not more than 400 meters apart when they pass each other going through those straits. So it's a very, very tight area. But the Russians obviously want to control this area. So you've heard about the assault on Mariupol, which is down there in the south on the right side of your screen. That city is very under siege right now. The Russians have asked if the citizens want to leave, they want to give safe corridor, they want them to put down their weapons. Essentially, the Ukrainians have said no, so that fight will continue on. Odessa, which is on your left side, left bottom, right on the Black Sea, very important port. That is probably the next city that will have itself under siege. Of course, at the top, you see Kiev and Chernobyl. Chernobyl's where we had the big nuclear disaster many years ago. Largest reactor in Europe. The Russians are in control of that right now. And then, of course, Lviv over in the most western part, that's where you've seen a lot of people leaving and escaping to get to Poland and to Romania and to get out of the onslaught of the Russian forces. Of course, the Russian forces are bogged down right now. They are using more what we call area weapons, artillery, rockets, indiscriminately hitting civilian targets, and obviously causing a lot of misery and terror. This is kind of the NATO breakdown. All the blue are the borders. And of course, General Gronski can talk about this. He lived this more recently. But, you know, if you look at Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, Latvia is a very key part of this NATO flank, in my opinion. You know, when I look at somebody like Putin, I kind of look at how is he looking at the war through his eyes. And, you know, he's made several threatening gestures about the use of nuclear weapons. And Latvia obviously is concerned because Latvia, as you can see, is a port area, and the city of Riga, which is their capital, is right there on that port. And the interesting thing about that, if I was Putin, I would try to take away that port from the Allies, because that's an area where the Allies can land equipment, naval operations, Marines, soldiers, sailors, and airmen. And that may be an area that may cause the next escalation. And as many of you may know, and you've probably heard, Article 5 of the NATO articles says that attack on one NATO country is attack on all. That brings the United States to the fight in a more direct way. And so where that goes, I guess we'll all see. So really the question is, what's next? Where do we go from here? So I'm going to go back to this slide, and Joe Gronski, if you want to kind of take it from here, I'll go ahead and mute and then and turn it over to you. Oh, we got you on mute, John. There we go.
General Williams, would you mind going back to the slide prior to this, please?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Okay, yeah, you could just leave it there, and thank you. I'm happy to talk about my perspective on everything that's going on here. I first, before I talk about my experience in the country of Ukraine itself, where I've had experience there between 2016 and 2019, I want to talk about perhaps a little bit more recent timeline of Vladimir Putin's reign in Russia for the last 20 plus years. He first came into power in 1999 as a prime minister, and then he really oversaw a siege of Grozny, Chechnya, in the Second Chechen War, where again under his leadership, the Russians just completely leveled the city of Grozny, which was in the Chechen Republic, which is a republic of Russia. So he's done this type of siege warfare where he's destroyed civilian infrastructure and has killed many civilians, dating back to 1999 into the year 2000. As a matter of fact, during that siege of Grozny, Chechnya, over 5,000 civilians were killed during that time. And then there's other malign behavior that Putin has done. And again, in terms of NATO response, Western response, US response, for the most part, it's been relatively muted. And it's almost no surprise things have escalated up to the point where in February, he decided to invade the entire country of Ukraine. I'll give you some examples. Back in 2006, under Putin's orders, a Russian dissident, his name was Litvinenko, was actually poisoned in the United Kingdom using radioactive isotopes. Again, an unconscionable thing for Putin to do, poisoning one of his dissidents in the United Kingdom. I mean, and we really didn't respond very aggressively to that type of malign behavior. In 2007, the country of Estonia, and General Williams, would you mind going to the next slide again now? Yeah, you'll see Estonia just north of Latvia, and General Williams was speaking about Latvia, but Estonia is north of there. In 2007, Russia conducted significant cyber attacks on the country of Estonia, shutting down their banking industry and other elements of normal civilian behavior in Estonia. And again, NATO, the West, really didn't do anything significant in response to that cyber attack. And then in the country of Georgia, which is in the Caucasus region in Europe, it's off this map, but the country of Georgia was invaded by Russia in 2008, and there's still Russian troops in the northern part of Georgia. And then, as General Williams mentioned, Russia went into the Donbas region of Ukraine and illegally annexed Crimea into part of Russia in 2014. And again, the response from NATO and the West was relatively muted. And then 2020, Russia, under Putin's orders again, one of Putin's political rivals was poisoned in Russia. And again, not any dramatic response from the West. And then, of course, Ukraine in February 2022. So the reason I wanted to point that out, it's a period of malign behavior, a period of over 20 years, where I think Putin was testing to see what NATO would do, what the West would do in response to some of his malign behavior. And I think he was emboldened by, for the most part, a lack of response. And that brings us to where we are today. Now, again, I served as one of the deputy commanding generals in U.S. Army Europe in 2016 to 2019. I spent 3 years living in Germany, but I traveled to well over 40 countries throughout the U.S. Army Europe's area of responsibility. And I spent a lot of time in Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Romania, a lot of the countries on the eastern flank, and I did spend a good amount of time in Ukraine as well, because after 2014, when Russia illegally annexed Crimea and began to conduct Russian-led operations in the Donbas region, which is in the southeastern part of Ukraine. When I say we, the United States and other NATO allies, including Poland, Lithuania, Canada, set up shop in an area near Lviv. And General Williams, could you go to the prior slide again? So you can see Lviv in the western part of the country of Ukraine. It's outlined there with a red star cluster there. There was a training area near Lviv. The name of the training area is Yavrev, and it's actually called the Ukrainian Peacekeeping Center. And that's where the United States, Canada, Lithuania, Poland would train Ukrainian soldiers. And many of these Ukrainian soldiers would be fighting in the Donbas region. And you can see the Donbas region highlighted by Luhansk and Donetsk. And these Ukrainian soldiers were fighting in that Donbas region in order to drive out the Russian-led separatist element, so Ukraine could be a completely whole and sovereign country again, at least in terms of the Donbas. And one of the reasons NATO did not bring Ukraine into the NATO alliance, one of the reasons, is because NATO will not bring a country into the NATO alliance that is having a boundary dispute. And there's some discussion and analysis that one of the reasons Putin created this incursion into the Donbas region was to prevent NATO from bringing Ukraine into NATO, because he created this boundary dispute. So it was something in Putin's mind logical for him to do. But at any rate, this training area near Lviv was an area that I would go out to many times, and I would see these these Ukrainian soldiers training in Yavrev, and I would talk to many of them. And although some of the lower ranking soldiers did not speak English, some of them did, and I would have conversations with them. And it's no surprise to me that the Ukrainians are showing a very high will to fight, because as I talked to these Ukrainian soldiers, they showed great will to go into the Donbas and fight for the sovereignty of their nation. And they were very patriotic and very courageous. And I also noticed that at the rank of lieutenant colonel, and a lieutenant colonel generally commands about 800 soldiers, and at the rank of captain, and a captain in the Ukrainian army normally commands around 140 soldiers. Those rank levels in Ukrainian army were very proficient, very tactically sound. So again, not a big surprise to me that the Ukrainians are doing so well. The last thing I want to talk about, and I'll turn it back over to General Williams and then see if there's any questions, is just the humanitarian crisis that we see right now. Again, if you turn news on any evening, it's hard to come away from watching the news without being completely heartbroken. I mean, you see the devastation of these cities, of the civilian infrastructure. There's over 3 million refugees now that have gone into countries like Poland and Romania, and there's some in Germany as well, and other European countries. Over 3 million refugees, so they've all left their country. And then United Nations have said that there's another 6 to 7 million Ukrainians that are completely displaced, that have had to leave their homes and their apartments because they've been completely bombed by the Russians' indiscriminate use of missiles and rockets and artillery fire primarily. So again, a grave humanitarian disaster that I believe the West should not turn a blind eye to. And some would argue that the West isn't turning a blind eye to it, because we are giving Ukrainians weapons. We are trying to send money and other material over there to help the refugees, but still every night we see more and more civilians just living in terrible dilemmas. And you got to recall too, Ukraine is a very cold country. Most of the temperature in Ukraine right now is below freezing. So you've got these folks out there in just horrendous conditions. Okay, I'm going to stop there and turn it back over to General Williams and see if there's anything he would like to add, and then see if there's any questions.
No, I think you hit on some great points, John, and I think maybe at this point, let me just go to question and discussion. So we'll open it up to everybody. So Emily, if you want to maybe guide that discussion, or if somebody's already got questions, we're happy to answer.
Sure, great. First of all, can we give you a round of applause? We actually have people in the room so you can hear us clap.
Thank you.
I know on a Zoom, we don't often get to hear clapping, but if it's okay with you, we can allow people to do questions in the chat. I do want to make sure that high school students are also able to ask questions. And if they want to come up, the ones in the room, if they want to come up to the screen, they're welcome to do that. But we'll give people a chance to get some questions going through the chat. And I don't know if you would like to read them yourself, or if you want me to read off questions for you.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and guide through? That might be a little more efficient.
Sure. Okay, here's a question from Cheryl. Can the Ukraine army keep the Russians from taking over the country?
Well, John, I'm going to let you answer that since you were there last.
Yeah, okay. Well, the Ukrainian army is having very good success against Russian ground units. And there's several reasons for that. First of all, the Ukrainians have shown a much greater will to defend their own country. The Russians, about 30 to 35% of the Russian ground forces are made up of conscripts who are not very well trained soldiers at all. And they're only in for generally 1 year enlistments. So again, their training is poor, and their will is poor. In the United States military, and General Williams knows this very well, we really depend on non-commissioned officers, the NCOs, to provide leadership, and we call the NCOs the backbone of our army. The Russians do not have that same concept with their non-commissioned officers. So the point I'm making is yes, I think at the ground force level, Ukrainians certainly have proven that they could defeat the Russian military. I think the hard part is the Russians are using a great deal of artillery, a great deal of long-range missile and rocket fire, not only firing from in Ukraine itself, but firing from Russia and Belarus in the Ukraine. And it's very difficult for the Ukrainians to take out those long-range surface-to-surface systems. And the Russians are doing this to try to break the will of the Ukrainians, because they are targeting these civilian targets. And that's, but so far, even the Ukrainian civilians have not shown that their will is breaking. And that's heartening to me. So we're just going to have to see how long the Ukrainian will could stay strong. Oh, by the way, NATO and the United States has provided a lot of anti-tank weapons to Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians are using those javelins and other anti-tank weapons with great effect, and also Stinger missiles, which are good for taking down helicopters and aircraft and drones that are flying at a relatively low altitude. So that's my answer to that. General Williams, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just add, when you think about the Russian hierarchy and how they manage their battlefield, it's very hierarchical. So for example, a commander of a battalion or a commander of a company has to make all the decisions. As General Gronski mentioned, we rely on our NCOs and staff NCOs to do some things in execution at the lowest level. As an example, when we were in Iraq, for example, I would tell all of my young troops, my privates and young soldiers around that lower rank, that you have the responsibility to make a decision, because if I'm not there, I can't necessarily see it. You can see it. And what I will do is get you all the resources that you need to solve your problem. They don't do that in the Russian army. The Russian army puts all their decisions back up to a higher level, and it takes them longer to make a decision. And then the other point that General Gronski made about these conscripts, what many people didn't know, many of the conscripts that did the initial invasion into Ukraine were mostly from the northeastern Siberia region, because if they lose those individuals, they don't really talk to people in Moscow. And as a result, that communication of loss does not necessarily communicate there. So they don't know that as well as maybe the people in that region where they came from. So so Russia is not as strong as it purports to be, but it does have nuclear weapons. We're definitely concerned about that. And, whether Putin would use these because he's not winning is always a potential.
Thank you. And I believe we have a question in the room. This is Sumaya Saki. She's a senior.
Hello again. So, for now, we're actually talking about the Russia and the Ukraine, because like all the world is occupied with this thoughts and everything that's going on. But my question is a little bit different from them. Since you guys have been in countries that were mostly in need of help, like before, like Afghanistan, like my country where I'm from, or Iraq, how beneficial is the US help has been there? In you guys' opinion, how US going there, fighting for that country, how beneficial has it been for that country in your opinion?
Are you asking specifically for Ukraine or previously?
I'm asking because you guys have fought for different countries like Afghanistan, Iraq. You have been to a lot of different situations. In your opinion, how was the American role beneficial to that country?
Well, I guess I'll start and then let General Gronski chime in here. In my opinion, you have sort of three factions that fight for how we would do business in a country. There's the political realm, and there's the diplomatic realm, and then there's the military realm. And wrapped around that is how we understand the culture, the information, the politics of that country, and what are the long-term prospects for success. And if you went back and look at some of our challenges, whether it's Afghanistan, Vietnam, smaller countries, I would say right now the United States doesn't have a really good record. And are we capable? Absolutely. Are we committed long-term? That is a question for a politician, because politicians have got to fund these programs, and they have to commit the American people to these long-term commitments. The other thing is the American people. Are they committed to long-term engagements? Because these things don't solve themselves in short term. Being from Afghanistan, Afghanistan has a 50,000-year history. And the problem is the United States has a 247-year history. So, the view of the world is, for most Americans, very short. And for the rest of the world, it's a little bit longer. So sometimes, our commitments may not be as strong as they should be. Should they be stronger? In my opinion, absolutely. Because we've said we're a nation of justice. And if we see this challenge that's going on in Ukraine, then we ought to have a commitment to it. As you know, we left Afghanistan in a very unprofessional way, in my opinion. and we're still trying to deal with that. As you know, there's many people we're still trying to get out of Afghanistan who are dealing with the Taliban, and that's all tied up now that we have this conflict. So we have some challenges in the United States to say, what are we committed to? I think in the United States, we're short-term thinkers when it comes to conflict, because, when you have a conflict, doesn't matter whether it's injuries or death on our side or the other side, takes about 80 years to recover from all that. And so the question is, if you start something, you got to know that you're going to be committed to it for at least the next 80 years. So John, I'll turn that over to you.
Yeah, I think in both Afghanistan and in Iraq, our political leaders made some strategic mistakes. One could argue that when we went into Afghanistan, it should have been an expeditionary mission to find bin Laden or not, and then leave the country. Instead, we tried to stay there for 20 years and turn Afghanistan into a democratic country. I think that was a mistake. Same with Iraq. Went into Iraq for reasons that our political leaders thought were the right reasons, and again, just stay there and try to change their culture and the way they were used to running a government. I will say this though, from the soldier level, and this is a big difference between the way the United States wages war and what we see the Russians doing. If we do hit civilian infrastructure with missiles or rockets or artillery or air power, we investigate those type of issues, and we don't hide them. We try to put them out there and investigate them to ensure that hitting civilian infrastructure isn't going to happen out of decisions we make. It's a mistake, it's an accident when we investigate those type of issues and try to prevent them from happening again. As we see in Ukraine, the way the Russians are targeting civilian infrastructure and civilians themselves is very devastating. So I think at the tactical level, we try our best not to do that. That's part of our doctrine, part of our policy. So I'll just stop there for now.
Thank you for the answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm going to combine a couple of questions from the chat. We had a student asking about the potential for Russian attacks on nuclear facilities like Chernobyl in Ukraine. And then there was another question about how concerned we should be about Russia's ability to conduct cyber attacks.
Well, if I take the first question on the nuclear situation, they've already attacked the couple of generators, nuclear generators. As I said earlier, they are in control of Chernobyl, because these are large electrical producing facilities. This is one of the things that the Russians would try to do, is control the infrastructure and to control the ability to deliver electricity. So they are definitely in control. Now, will they do something to expose the radiation there? Hopefully they're smarter than that, because, if you have some sort of event go on like had happened in Chernobyl, of course, there's still a lot of radioactivity around Chernobyl, but the half-life for some of these events can be up to 12,000 years. So, it's almost untenable to have something that would be of that event happen and poison the environment. So hopefully they're smarter than that. But then again, hopefully we'll never see that occur, but it's always possible. And even though most people don't want to think about that, you have to be prepared for that. And I'm sorry, what was the second question?
About cyber attacks.
Oh, yes, and the cyber. Yeah, well, the Russians are experts at cyber, and in fact, for many years after I retired, I actually ran the cyber crime program for the Crime Commission here in North Texas, and so we know what the Russians are capable of. They've attacked not only here in the United States, they've attacked all around the world. They have very capable people. Of course, we have very capable people. And we have yet to see the level of attack that would cause complete dysfunction by cyber, but it's something that all of the US agencies are prepared for.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in on a part of that cyber, and then I'm going to have to jump off, unfortunately. But I think a lot of people who have been observing this invasion of Ukraine are surprised that Russia did not use more cyber capability at the beginning of this invasion. You know, many analysts thought that the Russians would use cyber more effectively at the beginning, and they didn't seem to have done that, and that's actually a surprise to many people. But as General Williams said, the Russians are experts at cyber. I had mentioned earlier about the cyber attack that they waged in Estonia back in 2007, and they do that on a regular basis. But again, just kind of surprising they weren't more effective at the beginning in terms of shutting down some of the Ukrainian infrastructure with cyber attacks as they were moving into Ukraine. So with that, I'm going to, General Williams, I'm going to have to jump off. Emily, Marie, I'm going to have to jump off. I do appreciate the invitation to be part of this. I do have another engagement here in about 2 minutes, but I just want to say I think this is great that the school is doing this. Very important topic, especially for the students that are attending today. So thank you for allowing me to be part of your program.
Thanks,
Thank
John.
you, Major General Gronski.
Appreciate your time. Have a good one. Talk to you
All right.
soon.
Bye-bye.
It looks like we have a hand raising from our JROTC classroom, so I'll let them unmute and ask their question there.
Okay, so in light of the Cuban Missile Crisis, do you think Putin views Ukraine possible entrance into NATO a threat?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this is essentially why this conflict exists right now. You know, there's a little historical context here. I mean, it's not only about the Soviet Union, and he wants to restructure that organization. I think one of the challenges for him is that NATO and the West represent a historical problem for the Russians. If you look over history, the European tribes essentially have invaded Russia 45 times. And so I think what he tries to do is create this barrier. And I think that's what he wants, because that's what the old Soviet Union had. It had a barrier between Russia and the European elites, which would be France, England, the Dutch, Spain, Germany. And ultimately, I think this is one of his goals, is to try to create that barrier again. And Ukraine is just part of that bigger plan that he's been working on.
There's a question in the chat from Lyons. I believe that is Mr. Lyons, a math teacher here, who asks, why does Belarus support Putin's military decisions?
Well, you have to go back to the structure of Belarus. Belarus is very much like Russia in the sense that you have a strong man that's the president of Russia or Belarus, and then a strong man that's the president of Russia. And those two align perfectly in terms of philosophy. And I think Belarus is just an ally. You know, that's where Poroshenko was before he was deposed as the president of Ukraine. He was very pro-Russian. And of course, the Ukrainian people wanted him out, and subsequently Zelensky goes in. So he has some allies. Now, maybe the bigger question really to ask is, what about some of the NATO countries that were former allies of the Soviet Union or former republics of the Soviet Union? And one of them that everybody always has concern with is Bulgaria. Bulgaria had been the, I guess, the surrogate bad guys for the Russians for many years. And General Gronski didn't mention this. We've mentioned this on some of our calls together, but he would always talk about when the Bulgarians were in the room, even though they were NATO, a NATO country and NATO allies, the word was that if the Bulgarians were in the meeting, Moscow knew what was going on. So there wasn't always a lot of trust with the Bulgarians. So we're not sure about the Bulgarians in that sense. Of course, they speak very much about democracy, but there's some question about, where their loyalties lie as well. But with Belarus, there's no question their loyalties lie with Putin.
And if we have time for one more question before we close at 3:20, our senior Owen Daryani, who is the JWAC Vice President, has a question.
I was just curious how the settlement process for Ukrainian refugees is going. What country is taking in the most Ukrainian refugees, and how are their conditions?
All right. Well, right now, Poland is taking the most. Romania is taking some. Germany is starting to take some. The United States is taking some. And the question, which all the countries are asking, is how are they going to get support? And obviously, the United States, being the deepest pockets in the way of money, will provide as much food and refugee care and that sort of thing. And of course, you'll see more here in Texas. Because as you may know, Texas is the #1 refugee resettlement state in the country. And we had a large Ukrainian population here anyway. And so I expect to see more Ukrainians migrating here to the United States because there will be a point where Europe cannot absorb them all, especially as you get into the 10 million plus numbers. Right now you're probably somewhere around 3 million, 3.5 million refugees. So the obviously the nearest countries are kind of safe countries, but again, we don't know if the Russians will shoot across the borders, which that they seem to be wanting to hurt and injure and kill civilians, and so we don't know whether they'll adhered to the Geneva Convention. And as I said earlier, the Geneva Convention protocols of 1977, protocols 1 and 2, were about the protection of civilians, journalists, and military workers that were non-combatants. And the Russians signed up to that, but we don't know that they're going to honor that.
Thank you.
You bet.
So we want to thank you so much, and Major General Gronski as well, who had to leave. But that last question also ties into a community service project that we're working on that I wanted to mention. So part of what we do in our JWAC is education through guest speakers such as yourself. We also do leadership development and community service, and our students are currently starting a diaper drive. Oh, it's probably going to be reversed on your screen, but we're currently working on a diaper drive for refugee families for a nonprofit organization that is currently settling several families from Afghanistan. So we are, for the next 2 weeks, collecting diapers and wipes in the front lobby of the school for anyone who would like to donate. Mrs. Vera Williams, you want to come on up and close this out as well?
Well, thank you. That's a good project to do.
Thank you. We appreciate your time, General Williams. I've known you for a long time and know you very well. For those who don't know, General Williams is my husband, and I'm very proud of him for his military career, what he's done for the country. He's been a great servant leader, and I appreciate all that you've done. And I'm so glad that we were able to get General Gronski involved today, and both of you men are just are wonderful leaders, family men, great representative of the kind of model leadership that we want, not only in the military, but all of our young men and women here. And we thank you both for your time. And I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. And everybody have a great day.
I second that motion.
Well, thank you, Tariq. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thanks for being on the call.
Thank you
Everybody
all
have a
for
great day. All right. Bye-bye.
attending, everybody.